Hey there, fellow knowledge seekers. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Today, we're diving into the world of senses, how life evolved to experience the world around it.
Oh, cool.
Our guide is Origins of Life's Sensoria,
Bye.
Richard G. Lanzara, scientist, professor, and, get this, biotech entrepreneur.
Wow, that's quite a combo. What's the book about?
It's about how sensing and responding to the environment, well, it's like essential for life itself.
Makes sense.
But Lanzara doesn't stop there. He takes us all the way back to
Bacteria.
basic chemistry, and he shows how it all leads to, get this, consciousness.
Whoa, so like from molecules to minds.
Exactly. And speaking of journeys, Lanzara's own story is pretty amazing.
Oh.
Yeah, he struggled with dyslexia growing up. Imagine the effort to become a scientist and professor.
And a biotech entrepreneur, you said that too.
Right, to explain all this complex stuff.
It really shows you like the power of the human mind.
Totally. He even shares some funny stories from his research, like getting stuck in a dark room for hours,
What?
developing some radioactive gel. It wasn't always glamorous, haha.
Science can be messy sometimes, but hey, the pursuit of knowledge, right?
Absolutely. So let's get to the science. How did the very first cells figure out how to sense their surroundings?
Ah, the big question.
Right. Those tiny building blocks of life. How'd they do it?
Receptors. Think of them as the doors of perception for cells. They're these special molecules.
Molecules.
Yep. And they allow cells to detect like signals from their environment. And what's crazy is that even simple organisms,
Example, like bacteria,
even simpler. Lanzara talks about sea anemones.
the flower-like things in the ocean.
Those are the ones, they actually retract their tentacles
What?
if the protein level in the water gets too high.
No way. It's like they're saying, too much food, time for a break.
Uh-huh, exactly. Even basic life forms, you know.
They have this finely tuned system for sensing and responding. It's amazing.
It really highlights this idea, you know, that sensing and responding. It's universal across all forms of life. But there's a problem that's puzzled scientists.
What's that?
Drug desensitization. It's when drugs become less effective over time.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
You know that book, Awakenings by Oliver Sacks?
Rings a bell.
It's about these patients, right?
Yeah.
With this locked-in syndrome. They were revived by this drug,
Which drug?
LDOPA. But then, eventually,
Yeah.
they became unresponsive.
So how does Lanzara explain that?
He has this groundbreaking concept, the net shift model.
That shift.
Yeah, it's a totally new way to understand how receptors work. Imagine a simple balance scale.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Molecules, they don't just bind to receptors randomly.
They don't.
Nope, they prefer to bind to different states of the receptor. This preference causes a shift
A shift in what?
in the overall equilibrium of the scale, like which way the scale tips. That's what he calls the net shift.
So instead of on-off switches, receptors are more like this constantly adjusting balance scale.
Exactly. And what's really cool is that this model, it explains things like desensitization, which older models, well, they couldn't quite figure out.
Wow. So it's a major step forward.
Huge.
Yeah.
For understanding how our bodies interact with drugs, with our environment, it's really fascinating.
This is blowing my mind. So are you saying that even like our subjective experiences,
Subjective. Like what?
like how we see, smell, feel, all that,
It's all rooted in this intricate dance of molecules and receptors.
really?
It's what Lanzara proposes. Our perceptions, emotions, thoughts, they're all shaped by these tiny interactions.
That's wild.
And here's where it gets even crazier, the net shift model. It aligns with something called Weber's law.
Weber's law.
It's this fundamental principle of like how we perceive the world.
Okay, now you have to explain Weber's law.
So basically it says the just noticeable difference in any kind of stimulus. It's proportional to the magnitude of the stimulus itself.
So like if I'm holding a feather,
Yeah.
I'll notice a tiny extra weight more easily than if I'm holding like a brick.
Exactly. That's Weber's law in action.
Wow. But how does this connect to the net shift model and like consciousness?
That's the amazing part. By aligning with Weber's law, the net shift model gives us a potential link
A link between
those basic molecular interactions and the emergence of consciousness itself.
Well, hold on. So you're saying the foundation of our awareness could be rooted in these simple physical and chemical laws.
Operating at the scale of molecules and receptors. That's the idea.
This is seriously mind-blowing stuff, and we're just getting started. Stay tuned, folks. There's so much more to explore.
Oh yeah, we're just scratching the surface here. And Lanzara, he takes us even further. He reminds us, Those very molecules
Yeah.
made of star stuff.
Starp stuff.
Yeah, the elements forged in the hearts of ancient stars.
Wow. It's crazy when you think about it.
Yeah.
Or like literally made of stardust.
Right. It's mind-blowing. And it's the way those atoms, they came together, forming molecules, eventually those receptors, that makes life possible.
So it's not just like things being balanced.
It's more like a dynamic interplay, opposing forces.
Huh.
This constant push and pull, equilibrium, it's what allows life to adapt
To adapt.
to a changing environment.
Yeah.
So it's like a dance.
Kind of.
Yeah,
A delicate balance between stability and change.
I like that.
And from this dance, the first cells emerged. Those pioneers of life, right? They developed this ability
too.
to sense their surroundings, changes in temperature, chemical gradients, all sorts of stimuli
Uh-huh.
through those molecular gateways,
Mhm.
the receptors,
Hmm.
connecting the cell's inner world to the outside.
So life is about responding to change, adapting to, like, the universe's ever-shifting conditions.
Exactly. Profound, isn't it?
It is.
It has implications for like how we understand our own lives.
Yeah.
Just as those first cells, they had to adapt.
To survive.
Right. So do we. Lanzara uses this analogy of a windflower.
A windflower.
Just as it blossoms and dies upon the wind,
Oh, I see.
so too do our internal biochemical processes,
Yeah.
constantly adjusting to the flow of information,
Yeah.
energy from the environment. That's beautiful. So how does this connect to like our consciousness, our sense of self?
Lanzara argues, consciousness is an emergent property of this complex interplay between receptors, senses, and the brain. It's not something separate
What it arises from.
from the intricate web of interactions that make up our being. Yeah.
But if consciousness is ultimately based on chemical reactions, the dance of molecules, does that mean it's just like mindless processes?
Not at all. It's amazing, actually. These seemingly simple physical processes,
Yeah.
they give rise to something so rich, so complex, subjective experience.
It's like magic, but it's science.
It is, and it's a science that's still unfolding, still revealing its mysteries.
So true.
Lanzara even touches on the idea of qualia,
Qualia.
those subjective, qualitative experiences of our senses. Like, how do you describe the redness of red, the feeling of pain?
Those are big questions. Is he diving into philosophy now?
Well, they're questions that overlap philosophy and neuroscience. Lanzara doesn't claim to have all the answers. He offers a framework for thinking about these questions, connecting the subjective realm of experience to the objective world of molecules and receptors.
It's mind-boggling
Yeah.
that the vastness of the universe, the workings of our bodies, the mysteries of consciousness, all connected through these principles of chemistry and physics.
And we're just scratching the surface. There's so much more to explore about how life evolved to sense the world, how our consciousness emerged.
We could do a whole other deep dive on that someday.
Definitely. But before we go too far, maybe let's recap some key takeaways.
Good idea. I'm sure our listeners could use a refresher. Okay, so where were we? Ah, yes. Receptors, doors of perception.
Even those picky sea anemones, remember, they taught us something important.
Right. Sensing and responding, it's everywhere in life.
And then there's drug desensitization. That's
Yeah.
where the net shift model comes in.
It's like a balance scale, constantly adjusting.
Exactly. And it helps explain why drugs can become less effective over time.
And then, get this, our senses, perceptions, even consciousness. Maybe it's all about those tiny molecular interactions.
It's a pretty radical idea. Blurs the lines between the physical and subjective.
Definitely makes you think.
And Lanzara keeps going. We're made of star stuff. We're connected to the cosmos. And it all comes down to chemistry, physics, these basic
It's
laws.
humbling and kind of awesome, right?
It is. But where does all this lead? What are the implications of Lanzara's research?
That's a good question. What do you think?
Well, think about it. If our senses, our consciousness are rooted in these laws of nature,
Yeah.
imagine what we could do. We could understand these processes so much better.
And maybe even manipulate them.
Exactly. New treatments for diseases, enhancing cognitive function, maybe even expanding our understanding of consciousness itself.
Wow, that's getting into some sci-fi territory.
It is. And Lanzara's work, that's a great example.
Right, those tiny switches,
Hmm.
controlling the flow of information.
And it all comes down to chemistry,
Yeah.
which connects to brain function, behavior. It's amazing.
I really like how Lanzara emphasized the interconnectedness of everything. We're not separate from the universe.
We're part of this incredible web of interactions. Every thought, emotion, action, it's all connected.
Like a cosmic dance, right?
A dance that's been going on for billions of years. From the first chemical reactions to the emergence of life, to us.
It's mind-blowing.
And Lanzara's work really shows the power of curiosity, our drive to understand the universe, and our place in it.
Absolutely. So for our listeners out there, if you're fascinated by these
If
ideas,
you want to explore them further.
definitely check out Origins of Life's Sensoria. It's a challenging read, but totally worth it. It'll change how you see the world.
It really will.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into senses and consciousness.
It's been a pleasure.
Keep those minds curious, everyone. And until next time, keep exploring.